Hi, this is Mrs. Rodriguez, your algebra teacher. This video is about lesson 11-2, all about rational functions. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we have what a rational function is, and a rational function can be described by an equation of the form y equals p over q. So it can be written as a fraction where p and q are polynomials and q is not equal to 0. So again, our denominator cannot be equal to 0. Okay, so the parent function is when f of x is equal to 1 over x, and this is what that graph looks like. Okay, our asymptotes here are at the x-axis when at 0 and also the y-axis. And this is the type of graph. This is a hyperbola. And here the domain is when x is not equal to 0. And the range when y is not equal to 0. Okay. All right, so first type of problem you're going to see is you're going to have to state the excluded value for each function. So that means you have to set your denominator equal to 0, okay? So that means we would have 2x, set that equal to 0. And then that's just an equation. I would divide by both sides by 2. Now 0 divided by 2 is 0, okay? It is not undefined. So our excluded values would be when x equals 0, okay? Because if x was equal to 0, 0 times 2 is 0, and that when you can't have a 0 in the denominator, okay? So any other value we could put in there is fine except for 0, okay? All right, and then here, same thing. We've got in our denominator, we have 3x plus 9. So I'm going to set that equal to 0. And then I'm going to isolate x. So I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. So I got 3x equals negative 9. And then I would divide both sides by 3. So x is equal to negative 3. So if I plugged in negative 3, I'd get 3 times negative 3 plus 9. So I've got negative 9 plus 9, which equals 0, which would make this undefined. Okay, you cannot divide by 0. Okay. All right, so then we also have asymptotes. Okay, so a rational function in the form of y equals a over x minus b plus c, where a is not equal to 0, has a vertical asymptote at the x value that makes the denominator equal 0. So where x is equal to b. It has, that's the one we were just talking about. Okay. It has a horizontal asymptote at y equals c. So if we're adding or subtracting something to our rational function, then that we're going to have a horizontal asymptote there. Okay. The vertical asymptote was the one we're just talking about when the denominator is equal to 0. Okay. All right. So here I have y equals 1 over x minus 3. So nothing is being added or subtracted. So my horizontal asymptote would be at y equals 0. Okay, so that would mean I would have a horizontal asymptote at y equals 0. So y is 0 here. So this is where my horizontal asymptote would be. Okay. And then I also need to find, because it's telling me to graph the function, I also need to find my vertical asymptote. So I would set my denominator, x minus 3, equal to 0. And I get x equals 3. So that means when x is 3, so right here, I have a vertical asymptote. Okay. And this is going to help me graph my function here. Okay. So then I'm going to plug in values for x and figure out what y is, so then I can graph this function. So if I plugged in 4 for x, and the reason I pick 4 is because 4 minus 3 would be 1, and 1 divided by 1 is 1. I want to try and get an idea of what this is going to look like, okay? So that means that positive 4, positive 1, there's a point on that graph, okay? So I'm also going to plug in 2. 2 minus 3 would be negative 1, and 1 divided by negative 1 is negative 1. So at positive 2, there is a point at negative 1, okay? I'm also going to plug in 1. So 1 minus 3 is negative 2, and 1 divided by negative 2 is negative 1/2. So when x is 1, y is negative 2. Negative 1/2, excuse me, negative 1/2. And then I'll also plug in a 5, and 5 minus 3 is 2, and 1 divided by 2 is going to be positive 1/2. So when x is 5, y is positive 1/2, okay? So then kind of getting an idea of what my graph is going to be looking like. It's going to go like this. And then over here, it's going to go like, oh, let me try that again. It's going to go like this. So just recall that because of these asymptotes, they're going to approach the asymptote, but they're never going to cross the vertical or horizontal asymptote. So I just need a couple of points to get an idea of what my graph is going to look like. Okay. All right. So let's try one more. So here we do have a value that's being added. Okay, it's a positive 1. So that means we have a horizontal asymptote where y is equal to 1. So here's where y equals 1. So I would draw my asymptote here. And then I also need to get my vertical asymptote, and that's when the denominator is equal to 0. So I've got x equals negative 2. So I've got a vertical asymptote at negative 2, which would be here. Okay, so now I need to figure out where my points are going to be, or what my graph, get a better understanding of what my graph is going to look like. So I'm going to plug in values for x to solve for y. So I'm going to plug in negative, let's try negative 6. So I've got negative 6 plus 2 would be negative 4. And then 2 divided by negative 4 would be negative 1/2. Okay, so negative 1/2 plus 1, I still have this plus 1, is equal to positive 1/2. Okay, so when x is negative 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, y is positive 1/2. Okay, then I'm going to try negative 4. So I've got negative 4 plus 2, that would be negative 2. 2 divided by negative 2 is negative 1. And negative 1 plus 1 is equal to 0. So when x is negative 4, y is equal to 0. So I have a point right there. And then let's try negative 3 also. So I've got negative 3 plus 2, and that's going to be negative 1. And then 2 divided by negative 1 is negative 2. So negative 2 plus 1 would equal negative 1. So when x is negative 3, y is negative 1. Okay, so I'm getting a pretty good picture of what my graph is going to look like. Okay, so remember, it's going to keep approaching those asymptotes, but it's never going to cross. Okay, so then I'm going to plug in -1. So I've got, because I want to see what my graph looks like on the other side of this asymptote over here. So I've got -1 plus 2 would be +1. So 2 divided by 1 is 2. And then 2 plus 1 is equal to 3. So when x is -1, y is equal to 3. So that would be right here. Okay, and then I'm going to plug in 0. So 0 plus 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And then 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. So when x is 0, y is 2. Like this. And then one more, I'll plug in a +2, see where it's going. So 2 plus 2 is 4. 2 divided by 4 is 1/2. 1/2 plus 1 is 1/2. So when x is +2, y is 1/2. So about there. So I can see my graph is going like this. Okay. All right, so you're picking the values. You might still be confused as, okay, well, how do I know what to plug in for x? So you're plugging in values of x that would be to the left of your vertical asymptote, and then also to the right of your vertical asymptote, because you want to see what they look like on both sides of the asymptote. You don't just want to get one of these graphs. Okay. All right, so that's all I have. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. If you still have any questions, please feel free to stop by my office hours or call, text, or email me, and I'll be happy to help you. Have a great day.